Okay. Hello. We're just gonna wait for a few more people to join and then we'll get started.
Good morning, everybody.
I guess technically it is technically afternoon now.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I'm like just monitoring people trickling in, and I think we have most people. People can continue to join through our intro, but we'll get started. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. For those who don't know our company, we're Detail Roofing and Sheet Metal, a service-based roofing company specializing in leak investigations, preventative maintenance, and localized repairs for all roof types. We service multi-unit residential and commercial properties within a larger region of Southern Ontario, along with operations in the lower mainland of BC as Design Roofing. My name's Jessica Campbell, and I'm an account manager with Detail Roofing. I'll be moderating today's session. I'm joined by Michelle Wallace, our business development manager, and Kelly McDonald, client engagements and events, who will be delivering today's presentation. Before we get started, we'll just go through a few housekeeping items, and I will turn this over to Kelly.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So as I'm sure everyone is aware, today's session is valid for 1 CPE credit for anybody that does hold a general license with the CMRAO, and it will be available for you to report in the portal later today. So for anybody that has been on our webinars before, we do not issue certificates. So the way that we provide the proof of completion to the CMRAO is by providing them with the attendance report from Zoom. So following, we will provide that to them as your proof of completion for today's learning activity. The webinar is being recorded today, so we will have a copy that will be available on YouTube before the end of this week, and we can send that out to everybody in case anybody wants to view it again or in any situations where you want to share it. I just want to note that viewing the recording after the fact does not count for CPE credit. You have to be here live to get the credit. And then finally, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please utilize the Q&A feature. Depending on what kind of device you're using, it should either be towards the top or bottom of your screen. We will try to get around to as many questions as possible in the time allotted at the end. If we don't get around to it, we can always reach out to you afterwards to ensure your question is answered. And then also any questions that were submitted during registration, we also are going to do our best to get around to as many of those as possible today. All right, so let's dive in. As the title suggested at the beginning, today we are going to be talking about and looking at reviewing new construction roofs. So the content of this presentation is something that we've talked about presenting for a few years now, and that's primarily because we've been seeing a big uptick in buildings that we're doing assessments on or we're investigating leaks, where they're experiencing a really high volume of leaks or there's issues that appear to be an unresolved construction deficiency. And we're seeing it when it's 3 or more years old outside of the warranty period that would cover what is warrantable at that time. So what we want to be looking at today is highlighting some of the issues that we've been seeing, talking about why these might have gone unnoticed, and also just looking at if there's anything that can be done if you're in a similar situation in the future to prevent similar cases. So just an overview of our specific agenda today. So for starters, we're going to be looking at the Tarion warranty coverage and what is included at different phases. I just want to highlight that although we will be looking at what's covered at different areas, this is not an in-depth review of the Tarion process. Again, it really is just an observance of what it is that we've been seeing and how it relates to warranty coverages. After that, we're going to be looking at case studies of a few buildings that were 3 to 5 or 6 years old, looking at the different cases that they were having and how they related to potential construction deficiencies. Then we're going to look at assessing the roof, what that looks like, key things to look for, especially in the early stages, and then finally looking at deficiencies versus maintenance with some photo examples there as well. And then throughout today's presentation, we do have a couple polls, so we do encourage you to participate in those. With any of the polls that are launched, it is totally subjective, so there is no right or wrong answer. So we're going to launch our first poll right now. And Jessica, you are muted. Yep.
Yeah, I believe it's launched now. Okay, I see some answers coming in, so it's working. Poll one. So, what is the earliest you've experienced a leak following a new roof installation? I see a few more people answering. I'm going to leave it for a couple more seconds. And I think we're going to end the poll now. Okay. So, it's looking like, let's see. We have 30% of people saying in 1 to 3 years, 21 under 1 year. Prior to registration, we have 4%, and then a bit of the longer time ranges. So 3 to 5 years, 16%, and 5+ years is 29%. The lucky ones.
Yeah, so it does seem like there's quite a few people that are and have experienced leaks, very early on, in some cases even prior to registration. So let's take a look now at the Tarion warranty coverage. So with any new condominium, they are covered by the Tarion warranty in total from 1 to 7 years, but that is of course broken down into different phases with different coverage. So during the first year following the date of registration, this is really the key area, and especially as it relates to the roof and what we're seeing. What would be warrantable most often would be any defects in workmanship or materials, any defects that cause the building to be unfit for habitation, Ontario Building Code violations, major structural defects, or unauthorized substitutions. So in the second year, the warranty gets a little more specific. Some things included in the first year would not be included in the second year. And again, as it relates to the roof, the primary thing that we would be seeing here that would be covered by warranty are any leaks or water penetration. So also any defects in materials or work that result in water penetration into the building envelope, including the roof, would be things that are covered under the second year warranty. In cases like this, especially like if you are experiencing leaks in the first 2 years, it would be very important to have clear documentation of these leak occurrences so that when you're going back to the builder, you have evidence of this just to help support what's happening and help them cover those costs. And then so finally, there's sometimes when we've talked to people before and they're in this 3 to 7 year period, and they're saying, the building's still under warranty, so they think there's certain things that can't be done. But between the 3 to 7 year mark, what was covered in the first year, what was covered in the second year is not included in 3 to 7. The 3 to 7 year warranty is specifically related to major structural defects and any defects in work or materials that are going to result in failure of a load-bearing part of the home structure or material and adversely affect its load-bearing function. So I'm not going to read all of this in depth, but again, that 3 to 7 year period, not going to include defects in work materials or any leaks, but strictly anything that's going to affect the actual structure. So before we dive into our case studies, one thing that I think is equally important to highlight are items that are not covered by warranty, regardless of what phase it's in. So even in the first year, second year, anything like that, something like normal wear and tear. And that's something that we are seeing on the roof, especially because it is exposed to the elements at all times. Also, any damages, defects, or alterations essentially that are made by others. So whether it is the unit owner, the condominium as the owner. On the next page, we also have any damages or defects that are caused by municipal services, with the roof as an example. Again, if there's anybody up there, not a roofer, but another contractor that's up there for other purposes, whether it's for service of any units on the roof, telecom equipment, window washing, anything like that, if they are causing any damages or defects from the work that they're doing, that could potentially void the warranty, especially in those first 2 years. And then another one that, of course, we see when there are really severe storms. And it's been quite a while since we've seen something like this, but just as an example, if there's a really severe storm and a tree is knocked down or a portion of a tree is knocked down and it's causing damage to the roof, that would be considered an act of God and would not be considered a warrantable item. All right, so again, we're going to look at a few case studies where we were looking at different leak scenarios or completing overall assessments, and we're seeing things that did appear to be unidentified deficiencies. But before we do that, we're going to launch our second poll just to get people's opinions here.
Okay, the polls should be live now. So what do you think is a reasonable amount of time for a new roof to be leak-free? I still see a bunch of answers just rolled in, and I'm gonna end the poll. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. Share. So no one said 1 year. We have 19% saying 5 years, 13 is 7 years, 40% say 10 years, and 27% say 15+ years. I'll stop.
So I do agree with everyone on here that 1 year and shortly following that is an unreasonable amount of time to be seeing any leaks. And again, a lot of the times when we're seeing this, it's not due to natural progression or to weather events. A lot of the time it is due to the initial construction, defects in workmanship or similar cases. So the first case that we're going to look at is a condominium that was registered in July 2022. It did have various roof areas, some of which had on the top here, we have a 2-ply SBS modified bitumen membrane. And then most of their roof areas were like this, where it is an inverted roof system. And just for anybody that isn't aware, an inverted roof system has either the gravel ballast like this or paving stones. And then beneath that will be filter cloth, a few layers of insulation, and then the waterproofing membrane below. So they had a couple leaks that were happening. We were talking to the property manager in January 2024, and they had noted that they had a few leaks. Didn't really get into the specifics, but did note that at that time, because it was still in the 2-year warranty period, they were working with the developer to try to resolve the leak issues. At the time, they were interested in having a third-party review, but at this time, there was no immediate action. Ultimately, we were contacted between January to February 2025 to investigate a few new leaks that they were having. So in January, we looked at 2 leaks. They were side-by-side units that we had investigated at the same time. One of the units in particular, they did note had previous activity. They had another roofer that had looked at it twice, but the issue persisted. And then in February, there was one additional separate unit that we investigated as well. So following our investigations, there were additional units that were reported. So ultimately, the corporation decided to engage an engineer to complete a full audit of the roof with the as-built drawing so that they could confirm some details and come up with a report with their findings. So now we'll take a look at specifically what it was that we saw here. So just for reference, the first 2 leaks that we had investigated in January, this was the roof area above. So again, it has that inverted roof system where the waterproofing membrane is covered by multiple layers. And then there was also this perimeter wall around here that had a number of post penetrations. So these are some photos from that investigation where, again, we had gone into 2 side-by-side units and then traced it up to the roof above. So when we were in one of the units and we're looking behind the drywall ceiling, there was evidence of water behind there, some rusting occurring as well. And when we traced it up to the rooftop, it was this area where we have these post penetrations. So with an inverted roof, without removing the gravel, the filter cloth, and the insulation, you can't even get an idea about what's going on because it is all beneath here. So we had to remove this to expose the area below. We did note that some of the penetrations appeared to have some patchwork around it where not only was the quality, it appeared bad, but it was lifting in multiple cases. There was some sealant applied where the membrane was meeting the post penetration, which was splitting in multiple areas, and there was water behind there. And then when we had performed some membrane cut tests, there was also water observed behind the membrane in those cases. So we did a series of repairs at these post penetrations. And then again in February, there was an additional leak that we were looking at, a separate area. So this one is related to the SBS modified bitumen roof. In this case, again, when we were looking behind the ceiling, we could see some plumbing in place here that had some water staining down it. And when we went up onto the roof, traced it out, identified the exact stack that was related to this. We noted that at the base, there didn't seem to be anything going on here. It was in fair condition, but at the top of the stack, there was a pretty significant exposure here that could be allowing water entry. One thing to note too, with any roof penetrations, whether it's for plumbing, mechanical, electrical, there should always be flashing in place. So right here, we have the roof flashing. Behind here with these penetrations at the bases, you have different types of flashing here. So flashing is very important because these areas, when you think about it, are essentially just a hole in the roof. So the flashing is in place to help divert water away from these as they are vulnerable areas. And then the way we have it here and how it should be is that the flashing is installed underneath the membrane so that you can't see the base of it. That should be covered by compatible membrane so that you don't have water getting in underneath the flashing. So again, between May to June, an engineer had completed a full audit of the roof system, and these were their key findings. So primarily, one of the biggest things and what was contributing to the leaks that we were looking at in regards to these post penetrations, they had noted that the support posts were not constructed as per the design intent. So the design intended these to have pitch pockets, which are a form of penetration flashing. So it should have gone up, being roofed in underneath the membrane, again, to help divert water and protect these areas. They also noted that the plumbing stacks were not installed as per the initial design intent. So although there is flashing in place, the type of flashing that the design called for was a bit of a different style, something we refer to as a stack jack, where it was going to go all the way up and be capped off at the top and then insulated just for, again, added protection. 2 other areas that they noted, which, at least in the time that we were investigating and doing any assessments, didn't seem to be contributing to any leaks, but when they did a more thorough review of the roof, they did identify that along the edge here, the parapet wall, there was some exposed waterproofing underlayment, which they noted was just a sign of poor workmanship. And then they also noted some poor workmanship details at the doorway threshold. So again, all of these were eventually identified, but it was in the 3rd year when they were no longer covered by warranty and any repairs were ultimately the corporation's expense. So the second case that we're going to look at here, this corporation was registered in January 2020. We first visited in April 2024, where we had done overall assessments of the mid-rise tower as well as the townhomes. So again, the flat roof sections had the inverted roof. The townhomes had a combination of sloped shingles and then some flat roof sections as well. At this time, we were also doing a promotion where with a roof assessment, you could get a complimentary attic inspection, which they took us up on. So we did do an attic inspection at this time as well. And then the unit that we inspected, the reason that they chose that one was because it did have some previous leak activity. So we inspected it, provided a full report. And then the following year, between February to March of last year, if anyone recalls, we had a few back-to-back really heavy snowfall, big storms at that time. The ice damming issues that we saw were widespread. The leaks that we saw were widespread. So this was one of the corporations that was impacted by that and saw a number of leaks following the winter storm. So during that initial assessment, we were doing a walkthrough of some of the things that we found. And this assessment that we were doing, it wasn't a leak investigation or a condition assessment. So this was simply a visual overview. So on the inverted roof areas, we weren't removing anything. We weren't inspecting the membrane, just doing a visual assessment. So on the townhome, some of the key things that we identified, there were some areas where it's a little bit hard to see, but right in the middle here, you can see that there's an exposed nail head on the shingles, which would be a workmanship issue because that can result in leaks. The nail head should be underneath the shingles, not exposed. There were some poor details, notably around the scupper overflow drains. And then there were some areas where there was missing metal and some exposures along the stripping membrane that could eventually lead to water infiltration. Not as many issues on the inverted roof that we looked at. We did see that none of their drains had gravel guards, which we'll take a closer look at a bit later. But some of their drains were slightly or completely buried by gravel. Some of the penetrations had a few small details, and then we have this last one here where the vent was just offset completely. So we did recommend having somebody just install that correctly to make sure that there was no opening here. One of the biggest key findings that we found here was when we were doing the attic inspection. So again, this unit had some previous leak activity, but it hadn't been active in a while. And just of note, when we were there on this day, it was raining pretty heavily during this inspection. However, there wasn't any active water infiltration at the time. Now, that's not a foolproof indication that it's not necessarily coming from the roof, but it is important to note. So we went into the attic. And first of all, when we were looking around, there weren't any clear signs of any water staining or water entry from throughout the roof or from the roof deck. One of the biggest findings that we saw was related to the exhaust vents. So in this unit in particular, there were 2 to 3 vents that were connected to the roof deck like this. But if you notice down in this picture here, there is a slight opening. And it doesn't seem like that's very big, but it is enough to allow air leakage. And that air, which is connected to bathroom fans or kitchen fans, is just going to vent hot air into the attic. It can result in condensation. We have some suspected mold growth in some areas of the attic. And this can contribute to ice damming by making the roof too warm, which then melts the accumulated snow and refreezes along the bottom. So we did point this out to the manager, to the board, and just said that because of how new this building was, it stood to reason that if it was installed like this in this unit, it's very likely this is how the vents were installed in all of the units. So we did recommend that they look into some additional units to confirm if that was in fact the case and take corrective action so that the following winter in 2025 and beyond, it wouldn't result in any ice damming. And even before then, again, even if it's not resulting in ice damming, it can lead to mold growth in the attic or condensation that can result in an interior leak. So it was something that we recommended they take action on. Ultimately, no action was taken. So in 2025, following those back-to-back storms that we experienced, they did experience ice damming throughout the whole complex, and then had multiple leaks occurring. I believe in total it was about 14 leaks at 14 different units that we had investigated here. And then again, as we were going through doing the investigations, which included accessing the attics to identify anything that was happening there, it was confirmed as suspected that each of the attics had these vents installed in the same way, where there was some really major air leakage occurring. And then the final one that we're going to look at, so this one goes back a bit further. It was registered in September 2014. And our initial involvement here was just under 3 years later in June 2017 to investigate a reported leak. And then around that time, we had also done an overall assessment of the high-rise tower roof areas, which primarily green roofs in this case, with a couple inverted roofs as well. What ended up happening the following year in August 2018, I don't know if anybody recalls that time specifically, but there was a really major rainstorm that resulted in citywide flash flooding, very comparable to the storm that we had 2 or 3 years ago, where it was just such a substantial amount of rain that fell in a short amount of time, and in this case resulted in dozens of units leaking here as well. So during our initial assessment, it was a combination of some areas where it was just standard maintenance, such as we see here, pretty significant vegetation growth on the roof, as well as some of the vents had some openings or exposures. In some cases, something like this, it would have been installed like this to begin with, potentially a construction deficiency. In other cases, could have been more due to natural wear and tear, like the split caulking. But they did have some water infiltration, primarily in their mechanical room. This was again in the 2017 assessments and leaks that we had looked at. It was in 2018 that they had the major issues, and these were primarily related to the balconies. So again, during this time, we were doing really thorough investigations, going in each of the units, doing a thorough assessment of the balconies. So in all of these cases, when we were reviewing the balconies, all of them had membrane that was not adhering, it was lifting, it was detached. So those are the photos at the bottom here where it's kind of coming off completely from the wall, split and torn open here. We had cut it here. There's water seeped underneath and on the concrete below. And this is something where if we're coming across this at a building that's, I don't know, about 10 plus years old, it wouldn't be too crazy, but in this case, it was only 3 to 4 years old. So way too early to be seeing something like this, and definitely a sign of poor construction from the jump when it comes to this membrane system. Okay, so now after looking at some of these cases and before we dive into looking at what an assessment of the roof may look like, we want to talk about why these may have happened and how similar situations can be prevented. So for starters, again, I'm going to touch on the performance audit, but again, this is not a thorough in-depth review of that process. But just to highlight for anybody that isn't aware, the performance audit in the first year is required by the Condo Act. Any subsequent years after that, whether it's in year 2 or year 7, are not required, but people do often have them done at those times as well. But the thing about the performance audit is that it is primarily a walkthrough of the entire building. It is comprehensive in the sense that you are getting a picture of what's happening in the whole building, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every area of the building is going to be inspected 100%. It doesn't include invasive investigation unless there's evidence that calls for that. And typically, if there was more invasive investigation or if it went further than that, that would be something that would cost more. Typically, it would cover the bare minimum of what is required. Also, something that we've been seeing in recent years, not just related to the performance audit, but just kind of inspections in general, is that drone assessments have been becoming increasingly popular. So there can be a lot of benefits to completing an assessment with a drone. For one thing, when it comes to safety, it's going to eliminate any safety risk if you're not actually going onto the roof if you're at ground level. So when it comes to the fall protection hierarchy of controls, the very first one is to eliminate the hazard, eliminate the fall risk. So a drone does offer that. Also, we're coming across a lot of cases where, especially if it's a 3-story stacked townhome, it's not built with roof access in mind. So there isn't really safe roof access. And in a lot of cases, there might be alternative equipment like a boom lift or a crawler lift required to safely access the roof. So again, in those cases, a drone can be helpful, but ultimately, you're not going to get the same look, especially at small details, as you would if you're actually up close and looking at something. There's also some things that can be felt when you're doing an assessment that, again, you're just not going to get that same result with drone technology. So in cases where you want to ensure that things on the roof aren't being missed and aren't being overlooked, we would recommend taking a proactive approach, completing any additional, more exploratory review, just to help identify any potential deficiencies before it is out of the warranty period and to have a better chance of having the developer cover that. So one of the things that we want to talk about, and we want to talk about one of the pre-submitted questions that we got, which is what can we do to confirm it's a construction deficiency if the condo does not want to spend the money to investigate themselves and the developer is not doing anything? Firstly, in this case, I would say if you are actively in the first or second year and you have your designate, whether typically that's going to be your engineer, but if it is somebody else, we would recommend consulting with them since they are the person dealing with both the developer and Tarion liaising between them. We would always recommend going to them, consulting with them, getting their opinion on this. One thing just for reference is that Tarion has a document called the Common Elements Construction Performance Guidelines for residential condominiums. And in that, they outline the minimal acceptable performance standards for various areas of the building. And this is the guideline that they use so that if there's any disputes between the builder and the corporation about what constitutes a defect in work or materials, this is what they use as their guideline. So we just want to take you through, this is a very large document. It's almost 200 pages and it covers a very wide range of items. Specifically, what we're looking at today is their section about roofing. So when it comes to acceptable performance, one of the things that they note is that any leaks due to snow or rain driven into the building through roofs, grills, or vents, the acceptable performance is that these will be constructed in a way that is going to prevent any precipitation entry or insects, and also that they should be installed in accordance to the Ontario Building Code. So we were doing a review of a building that was within its first year and noted that there was a vent that was missing entirely. So of course, that's something that we want to highlight so that it can be taken back to the builder to ensure that they are going to have something in place there. Next up, when it comes to roof leaks, the acceptable performance is that roofs shall not allow water penetration. So again, even as we saw in the poll earlier, nobody thinks it's reasonable to be having leaks in the first year, second year, early on like that. But of course, we know they do happen. So if there is any water penetration, it is the builder's responsibility to look into that and to identify any corrective action. So next up, water trapped under the roofing membrane. So the acceptable performance is that water shall not become trapped under the roofing membrane. And in this case, they don't have any specific remarks about any allowances outside of that. Just for reference, the photo that we have here is just to show an example of water underneath the membrane. This was not at a new roof. And in a case where it's suspected that water is trapped under the membrane, you wouldn't want to have somebody go up and cut into it, especially in the first or second year, as that could and very likely will void the warranty. So this one may be a little trickier to identify, but this is definitely something that you want to be working with the designate and the builder to confirm any potential trapped water under the membrane. So if the roofing membrane is defective, they noted here that the acceptable performance is that the system will be installed in good workmanlike manner, free from any damage, and shall meet the Ontario Building Code requirements and the requirements based on the design. Another thing that they noted in their remarks here is that if it's not specifically outlined in the design what the specifications are, that can always be found based on the manufacturer's specifications. And different roofing systems or different membrane types, even between different manufacturers, a lot of the specifications are usually pretty similar depending on what the system is. So something like this here, this was a building that was within its first year, and there wasn't anything where there was actively water getting in or appeared to be getting in, but it was poor workmanship, not as per manufacturer guidelines. So that's something that we wanted to highlight, just so that it wasn't going to become an issue later, especially something that if it's an issue now, we don't want it to present issues that's going to result in leaks in years 3, 4, 5. So next up, any roof ballast that's not sufficient or evenly distributed. So in the design, it's going to stipulate how much gravel ballast is going to be on the roof, the distribution, and the physical attributes of the actual gravel itself. So any cases like this where the gravel ballast is displaced or there's not a sufficient amount on the roof to be able to adequately cover the layers below. Even in something like this, you can see there's filter cloth here, there's insulation. So the actual membrane isn't exposed here, but even these layers, you don't want to have prolonged exposure to any UV rays. So this is something that we would want to highlight so that this can be covered up completely, whether that's redistributing some of this gravel or adding new gravel so that it is covered completely. And then so this one here is any roof counter flashing missing, poorly installed, damaged, or not secured. So acceptable performance is that it must be installed in good workmanlike manner, meeting the requirements of the design. So this was a case here again within the first year. This building had quite a few issues going on, but this was an area where we saw that the metal was detached. And over time, there can be things like storm damages, but in this case, it seemed like it just was not secured adequately and was due to poor workmanship. So again, something that we wanted to document and flag so that the builder could address that. And then the final note within the roofing section specifically talks about any standing water on flat roofs. So it notes that the acceptable performance is that flat roofs shall be installed to drain water. Standing water on roofs designed for water retention is acceptable. One of the remarks here, and this is very important to note, is that some standing water is not an issue. And if it's a little slower to drain, not an issue. It's cases like this where it's really not draining at all. We can see a drain in this photo. I believe this was the only drain on the roof, but even after a couple days, there's still a significant amount of water up here that's not draining. But some standing water, even over the course of a couple days, is normal. So for our final section here, we want to take a look at some photos of some common items that we see on roofs and what might constitute a deficiency that might be warrantable versus something that would just be standard maintenance. Before we dive into here, Jess is going to launch our third and final poll.
Yay, all right. So the last poll we have is, at what stage would you no longer consider a roof to be new? Okay, I see answers trickling in. We'll give Kelly a chance to drink some water. All right, and I'm gonna close the poll in 3, 2, 1. So let me just share our results. We have 2 years, 6% of respondees said 2 years, 37% said 5 years, 23% said 7 years, 28 is 10 years, and 6% said 15 years.
Okay. Yeah, so we talked to a lot of people who, were talking about an assessment or issues that they might be having when the roof is, say, around 10 years old. And they say, or we're just asking about their building and they say, oh, my roof is, or my building's 10 years old, it's pretty new. Something to keep in mind that a building that is 10 years old or a condo that is 10 years old is relatively new. That doesn't necessarily mean that the roof is. I mean, it's going to depend on the type of roof system that's installed, but lifespans can vary anywhere between 15 to 30 years on average. So typically, if you're just starting to look at a roof when it's 10 years in, often there could be a lot of issues already happening. It could take some time to kind of catch up, versus if you were implementing anything earlier and kind of investigating any issues earlier. So when it comes to maintenance and implementing a maintenance plan for the roof, just like any other building system, routine maintenance is required to help ensure that the service life of the roof is going to be met, if not exceeded, and also just to prevent any unexpected issues over the years. So we also recommend earlier implementation, again, just to reduce any emergency spending, surprise leaks, anything like that, prevent any minor issues from becoming major, and also just to help budget for standard upkeep over time. So again, we're going to go through some of the examples here, starting with drainage. So fortunately for the buildings that we have looked at in the past, we haven't come across many issues where there's issues with the actual drainage hardware, or it's not adequately roofed in or sealed with a compatible membrane. That is something that would likely be a deficiency, and could be reported to try and have the builder deal with that. One thing that we have run into quite a few times is if the drainage isn't installed where intended. So we have the blueprints for the roof. It's showing where a drain is supposed to be, but then we're looking and there's nothing there. We've had some cases where even if you're exposing the roof system, still just no drain installed. Other cases, like the photos up here, there is a drain installed, but it's not accessible. It is covered or blocked. So in this particular case, you can see in the small photo in the corner here, there was a drain there, but it was covered by an access panel and then the paving stones. So not impossible for water to get between the cracks here and drain, but it isn't going to be adequate drainage. It is going to impact how much is going to be able to get in there and for the drain to be able to serve its purpose. Something that would not be a deficiency at any point and would fall under a maintenance item is just ensuring that the drains are clear of any debris or clear of gravel ballast, anything that is going to block the adequate drainage. So as I was mentioning earlier, something that we always recommend to help prevent any blockages at the drains is installation of perforated metal gravel guards. So we have two examples here. This is something that you want to be mindful of because this was a roof that we were doing an assessment on, and we saw that they did have gravel guards installed, but the gravel guards were the same size and the same height as the drain screen. So as you can see, that's not preventing anything from covering and blocking the drain. You still have gravel ballast covering this, and it's inside in between where the gravel guard is and where the drain screen is. So you want to make sure that the gravel guard is going to be taller than that, to be able to prevent most things from covering and blocking this drain. And then on a similar note, so specifically drainage related to scuppers. So scuppers are drainage that is through a wall. These can either be used as the primary drainage system on the roof, or it can be used as overflow drainage. So there may be flat roof drains, and then scuppers are installed, especially in cases where we're experiencing really heavy rainfall, or if there's heavy accumulated snow that's then melting. The overflow scuppers can just help alleviate any pressure on those main drains in these special circumstances. So we've actually come across a few situations in the last couple of years, like this top photo, where the scupper that's installed isn't the right size. So it should be flush with the wall around all sides, but we've seen some cases where the actual scupper insert is a little too small. You have these gaps and exposures all around, which again, so if water is getting into these areas, then it can result into a leak into the area below. Sometimes these can be really slow leaks that are happening over extended periods of time, which can sometimes be the worst leaks because they're not being identified and investigated in a timely manner. Another possible deficiency item that we come across related to scupper drains would be on the other side of the scupper, it should be roofed in with compatible membrane with part of the rest of the roof system. So if there's any damages or defects in the workmanship with that membrane and the scupper is not adequately roofed in, that could be a potential deficiency item. Similar to the other drains that we looked at, any debris or blockages, that would be a maintenance item, and just regularly checking the scuppers to make sure they are clear and free flowing. Because of the membrane that we were just talking about, something that could be a potential maintenance item is just doing a liquid membrane for any added seam reinforcement. So with membrane, and again, this is going to be primarily on a roof where the membrane is exposed. So one of the most popular types of membrane that we see on flat roofs is what we have here, the 2-ply SBS modified bitumen. This could also be cases where it's a single ply membrane. So whether it's TPO, vinyl, EPDM, the rubber roof membrane. Any deficiencies would be poor workmanship or anything not installed to the manufacturer specifications. Any incompatible membrane installed. So we've seen some cases before where there might be a mixture of membrane types that aren't necessarily compatible. And if they're not compatible, that could result in issues with adhesion over time, where the membrane is going to lift at the seams and allow potential water entry. And then finally, as I just mentioned there, any opening or lifting membrane seams that are visible at the time of inspection, you would want to note as a potential deficiency item. So any maintenance items in the bottom photo here, we just have some natural deterioration. This was a building that was 2 years old. Typically, we're seeing this later in time. 2 years is a little bit early, but again, this is nothing to do with the workmanship, the quality of installation. It is just natural loss of UV protective granules. So if you're catching it at this early stage, it is a very simple repair, coating this with a liquid membrane and then renewing some of the UV protective granules versus having to do a more extensive repair as this progresses. And then, as we noted at the beginning in the section about what is not covered in warranty, any man-made or storm damages, or similarly, any damages from animals or insects. And then one of the biggest things that we saw, and earlier I was noting how roof penetrations can be incredibly vulnerable areas. So we see a pretty high volume of deficiencies related to roof penetrations, and they are something that you want to keep in mind for any maintenance items. So some of the most common deficiency items that we come across, in this case here, the base of the penetration flashing is not roofed in with compatible membrane. So you can see the flat base of the flashing in this case. So again, water can get underneath here and leak into the area below. If penetration flashing is missing where it's intended or required, if the penetration flashing doesn't fit. So in those cases, typically we see that it's too large and there's a pretty significant gap between the flashing and whatever the penetration is. Those would also be items that you want to highlight as potential deficiencies. Some of the standard maintenance items may include sealing the bases of roof penetrations. So this is a building that I believe this photo is about 3 or 4 years into the roof's life. So there is some natural separation that will start to happen over time. So adding a compatible liquid membrane like we have in these photos here can just help to reinforce these areas so that water doesn't get in. And then similarly, over time, we tend to see damages or deterioration to the penetration flashing. So you can see here, this is a little dented in. We've seen many cases where it's not only dented, but there's actually even just a small hole can lead to water infiltration. We've seen some uh, perforations due to rusting that has occurred. Anything like that would be more of a maintenance item. And then when it comes to sloped roofs and shingles, one of the biggest deficiency items that we see, and we were highlighting this a bit earlier, is any exposed or visible nail heads. And then similarly, if the shingles were not installed as per manufacturer guidelines, I don't think there's many cases or any cases really that we've seen on a new installation roof at a new condo where there have been deficiencies with the actual shingle installation and how it's laid out, how it looks. The primary thing is always the exposed nail heads. As far as maintenance items, any shingles that are lifting, missing, damaged, they also have the UV protective granules similar to the SBS membrane. So if there's any loss of granules, either replacing those localized shingles or renewing the granules. And then if there's any surface debris or organic growth. And then finally, just something to keep an eye out for is the vents on sloped roofs. So there can be different styles of vents depending on what their use is for. Some of the ones that we see most often, these are AF50 vents. They are meant for air outtake in the attic. These vents are not meant to be connected to anything on the interior. We were doing an assessment last year, and when we were looking, we noticed that throughout all of the roof areas, there were a lot of AF50 vents. There were plumbing stacks, but we didn't notice any stem vents, which are used for exhaust and connected to those bathroom fans and kitchen fans. So from looking at the roof surfaces, we did suspect that it was possible for the exhaust vents to be connected to an incompatible vent on the roof. We had completed a few attic inspections where we did confirm that was the case. So again, you can see the big square opening here for this type of vent, which is not compatible. So if you're able to identify that it's not the compatible vent, that would be something to raise as a possible deficiency versus if there's any damages. These are both, excuse me, these are both from pest damages, which would be maintenance. So just final thoughts here. Completing proactive maintenance and inspections can help identify otherwise unnoticed deficiencies, strengthening the odds that the building covers the correction. Also, the expense of the corporation correcting deficiencies outside of the first 2 years is often greater than the cost of additional inspections, should that be required. And then it also just in those first 2 years, especially, if there is any leak activity, ensuring that it is thoroughly investigated and documented so that you have clear evidence and a better likelihood of having your claim substantiated if you are having any leaks or other issues. Okay. Right, so that concludes our presentation. I will turn it over to Jessica now to see about any questions.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I have a couple of questions submitted now, but if anyone wants to type some questions into the chat, you're more than welcome to, and we'll do our best to answer them in the next few minutes. If you have questions that come up after the presentation, you're more than welcome to submit them to service@detailroof.ca, or you can contact one of us directly if you already have an existing client rep who you work with. So the first question that I have is from Grace Chung, and she's asking, if there's water running down along a precast wall, is that a Tarion deficiency? Does it require flashing with drip edge to deflect the water? And could this cause a premature precast deterioration or building code violation. So to answer this question, I think that it really depends, and I would take photos to document anything, like if you have a concern about that area. Generally, you would want to see flashing, but it also depends on the detail. If it's if there's precast panels on the wall, it might be different. Like certain materials are meant to deflect water, so it's going to depend. But I would definitely document everything. I think also like if any advice we're giving now, it's going to be specific to your individual situation. So if you do have photos and you want us to take a look, we're more than happy to do that. I would just make sure that if there's water ingress being caused by that, that's a huge concern. And if there is water, if it's sitting on the exterior, that I don't believe is covered, but if it is actively water is coming in, that's that would be the main issue. Yeah. All right. Thank you for a great presentation. Oh, Kelly, are you muted?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Sorry, I just realized also that we had a pre-submitted question that I didn't get a chance to cover when I was speaking about maintenance, especially because we're not seeing this often with new developments. And Michelle, maybe you can answer this one. They were asking specifically related to metal roofs. What kind of maintenance is required there if you do have a metal roof?
Yeah, for sure. Metal roofs are generally very low maintenance. So that's one of the great things about metal roofs. You do need to get them regularly inspected, checking and sealing any penetrations, and checking any of the cladding screws and nail heads or anything that needs to be sealed on that. So there is minor amount of maintenance that is required on it.
Great. And then for wind, relating to the inverted roof systems, do we have to worry about that lifting, or what are the kind of main maintenance items if you see lifted inverted roof systems? I think this is for the filter cloth question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, Michelle, you go.
yeah, it's really just about reseating the gravel ballast and making sure that the filter fabric and the insulation don't blow away. If you have your roof properly seated with proper gravel ballast, there shouldn't be an issue with the wind and the filter fabric and the insulation blowing away. That's why it's just important to make sure to get your roofs inspected and making sure that you're doing that on a regular basis starting in year one to make sure that you're ahead of those things.
Yeah, I think that's another great thing for like metal flashing. If you have something that was installed improperly and it's lifting a little bit, it can appear minor, but if we get a really bad windstorm and it becomes detached, then that's where it becomes more of a safety and liability issue. I have a question for a townhome complex. How often should a full roof inspection be done, especially for balcony divider posts, sealants, and scuppers?
Okay. So for all roof types, we do recommend annual inspections done. So it depends on the access of the roof areas and the budget. I mean, there are some corporations that can't afford to get all of their balconies inspected every single year. So maybe you do it in phases. It depends on whether it's owner's responsibility, but the general rule is to recommend to get it done once a year.
I'll just make a note on that as well. We do offer no charge overall roof assessments. There are limitations, of course, like typically if it's a townhome, we'll go on 1 to 2 blocks. For a brand new building, we typically do like a paid warranty assessment, but after year 2 or beyond the first year, we'll do a complimentary assessment. So if you do have a site where inspection would be a benefit, we can definitely talk to you about our free options or our paid options to kind of depending on the level of care. But definitely if you're having leaks from balconies and dividers, that's a really good indication something is going on. And like if it's happening at one unit, it might not be a bad idea to kind of at least do a sample of your site and see what's going on, because it can really help long term, especially with some of the weather events we've been having lately. Because what we've been finding a lot is like when the weather's really bad, that's when tenants are so worried and they want to have us respond, but there's certain things that can't be fixed in the dead of winter, especially when we're having freezing. Okay, I think we're at time. So if there's any other questions, we're happy to answer them. After, I think Kelly will have the list of questions so we can respond back to them after this as well.
Yeah, I also just wanted to highlight because we have gotten a couple questions about it. So in case anybody missed it at the beginning, just to clarify, by being present on today's webinar, we do have your details through Zoom. So I'm going to download that list and send it to the CMRIO as your proof of completion. And as noted, as of today, this activity will be available to report through the CMRIO portal. It will be titled Reviewing New Construction Roofs with our name, Detail Roofing, listed.
Great. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And
Thank
I
you.
hope it's informative. It was informative for me. It's my first time seeing it. So yeah, always a pleasure. We'll have more events like this in the future. So just keep an eye out.
Thanks, everybody.
Today.
Thank you.